works. Good afternoon. Is the text big enough? Can people read that reasonably well? Okay, good afternoon. What? Bigger. Bigger, okay. They want it bigger. We're gonna have to go bigger. Even bigger? Let's try, let's go with that for now. So good afternoon, good morning in Asia. I guess probably 2, 3, 4 a.m. So late good night or good evening. I don't know whether to stand or sit. I'm going to try standing. So my name is Greg. I make, for better or for worse, an Emacs package called racket-mode. And racket-mode is a package that consists of various Emacs major and minor modes. There are a couple of modes for editing your code, such as racket-mode itself, hence the name. There's a newer racket hash-lang mode, which uses information supplied by the language, much like Dr. Racket, for purposes like indents and syntax highlighting and so on. Racket XP mode is a minor mode that enhances either of those two modes with check syntax information about, say, the source of the variable, where it comes from, other information about it. There is a REPL, surprisingly, and a mode for the REPL. There are various other miscellaneous modes for logger output, for the profiler. Fairly recently, I added a mode for packages, similar to when you're listing Emacs packages. Now you can list Racket packages. There's a macro stepper mode, and there's even a step debugger mode, which is what I will talk about at the very end. And it works is kind of an allusion to my struggles over the year to figure out what the hell I'm doing, and also a little bit an allusion to the final topic of using the step debugger to figure out how things work. The package really consists of Emacs code and then Racket code running in a process. And over the years, some of the challenge was simply figuring out what's a good way for those two pieces to talk to each other. By volume, it's about 60% Emacs Lisp code and about 40% Racket code today. That's not a particular goal. That proportionally shifted over the years as certain features require more front-end or back-end code. Let's see here. It works. So, like very early on, the very earliest version was pretty much similar to using XREPL, and then the user could do the little comma commands that would be entered in the REPL to, say, load a file or do other things. And then racket-mode itself might send some of those commands. Some of the limitations were if a command was very long running, it would block all other commands. And it was a little weird for the Emacs code to be kind of putting commands into the REPL at the same time that you were using it. So then after some years, we switched to kind of a command and response design. And a command is sent. The response is async and arrives whenever it decides it's done. So a long-running command won't block shorter-running ones. And all of the I/O between the front and back ends is done over standard in and standard out of that Racket process. And traditionally before, each REPL, because you can have more than one REPL open at a time, would have its own TCP/IP connection for its I/O for, say, input into the REPL or the output that you see in the REPL. So for better or for worse, that was the architecture. And then more recently, I had a request from an anonymous user who to this day I still don't know who they are, but they wanted to be able to run, to use Tramp and use racket-mode to run projects on a remote server. And so I added the ability to support multiple backends, local and or remote. And also today, all REPLs route their I/O through the same kind of queuing mechanism that is used for commands. So there's no more gratuitous use of TCP/I/O. So the common case is what most of you will have when you start up racket-mode is there is one backend process running on your local computer, and the gray backslash just means that it is covering all directories on your local computer. Another use case that you can configure is maybe you want to run, I don't know, let's say release Racket for everything on your computer, but in one special path for a particular project. You'd like to use the pre-release, like a snapshot build, or you're building from source. So if you have reasons and want to do that, you may. You can, of course, add a remote backend to this scenario that you were accessing via Tramp and Emacs. There could be multiple directories on that remote. There can be multiple remotes. So this is not a scenario that I do every day or recommend that anyone does, but in theory, it is possible and should work. So another quick topic. Someone said, I think whoever said it has been lost to history, but someone once said that the top level is hopeless. And for, I don't know, issues like redefinition and phases, I mean, what even are phases? I've never really understood. So my personal corollary is that REPL output is kind of a hopeless mix of all sorts of stuff. And you have prompts, you have printed values from the P in REPL, you have user program output that can have any arbitrary kind of characters in it. Maybe there are error messages with locations, and it would be cool if you could go reliably to the location of the error without having to use a regular expression to parse it, and blah, 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 blah. So the traditional way to deal with all that output is kind of lossy, which is first you take all that structure and you lose it by writing it as plain text. And then on the front end, you try to use regular expressions to recover it. And, it's kind of like that classic Stack Overflow question about, like, how do I parse HTML with regular expressions? Yeah. So within the last year or so, and in relation to some of the multiple backends, I have switched to, well, if we have all the structure, why throw it away? Why not have the backend, transfer it to the front end, and then the front end can use that. And so there is some small progress in humanity. When I talked to you all in 2019 in Utah, the idea of a hash lang mode that would be driven by lang supplied info was just a dream and like a little twinkle in my eye. But in the years since, that is now working, and it's using amazing building blocks provided from both Matthew and Robbie. And I know people like Sam are using it enough that if say, a recent build of Racket itself breaks something and I can't start the backend process, then we need to figure out some workarounds for Sam. But I was going to show an example here. Do I have an example? Can I not actually change the presentation while I'm trying to find the example? Does this have, it's just a very super simple example. Like we hover on F. It says there's one bound occurrence. It knows why is it a mutated variable? That is interesting. I'm not sure what that meant. I didn't make that message, so I'm just don't shoot the messenger. And it will have information about various imports and exports. So I'm not going to dwell on that because that's not that new anymore. Actually, sit down for this portion so we can race through. Over the years, Emacs itself has gotten various niceties added to it. So one example, scribe, search. So one thing right here, I'm just using Emacs, and there's kind of on the right side for completions, there's some annotations. And so, I've tried to do that with, when you're using some racket mode features like, I want to search for documentation on print. Well, there are a few prints in the Racket ecosystem. And so one column is showing you the type of thing, what kind of thing it is, the source that it's coming from. And then within the last year, there's been a kind of family feature added, I think, to help tame this problem, especially with Rhombus on the scene now. So, this has been handy. There's also, describe Racket package. Here again, if you have packages available, some might be installed automatically, some might be installed as a dependency. there's some information. We can go in and here is a relatively new page, which is similar to what you get on the package's website. All of these underlined things are links. It's graying out items that have private in the path because that's kind of a convention in our ecosystem that's not part of the public interface. So you can even go visit. Did I configure Wi-Fi correctly? Yes. Okay. Oh, but what other browser tabs do I have open? There might be secret things I won't show you. Okay, so I mean, everything is, so I've really tried to linkify things as well whenever possible so that you have interesting places to go. So final topic, I'm almost at the end here. There is a step debugger built into Dr. Racket, and there's also one built into Racket mode. And it has, I put it in, and it has had this experimental label for literally years now, which is kind of bullshit. I mean, it's just kind of time to fish or cut bait. So I've been doing some thinking about, like, why don't I use the step debugger more, and how could it be better? And, you know, for some context, and to show you how old I am, in the 1980s, I used to write C code, C++ code, and there was this book I read called Writing Solid Code, I think written by a Microsoft programmer. And there was a lot of good advice in there about using assertion statements, maybe similar to how we use contracts today. But one piece of advice was when you write some new code, don't just hit the run button. Instead, run it in the step debugger and step through it and see what it actually does. And sometimes it will surprise you and you'll learn interesting things. So, but in my years using Racket, I never do that. Instead, I use the one secret trick used by professional Racket programmers, which is print, you know, or maybe if you're in a fancy mood, you might use a logger topic or something like that. And, you know, so why is that? I mean, I think one reason is we have a REPL workflow, you know, where let's say you write many smaller functions, and then you can try exercising each one in REPL. Oh, I'll try calling it with a value. How does it behave? And maybe another type of value. And maybe this is approximately like running first in the debugger. I'm not sure. Anyway, maybe some of those examples you try at the REPL prompt turn out to be good unit tests. And, you know, that's a great workflow, and I'm not unhappy with it. But I'm still just kind of thinking sometimes, you know, what is the speed bump to using the debugger? And, you know, is there something from the 80s that I have lost and should try to rediscover, or am I just getting old? So if we have any Q&A time left, maybe you have thoughts about using a step debugger. I have tried to at least review a few things and make a few small improvements. You know, I tried using the debugger with things like rhombus. I noticed some ambiguity in my UI. And like, well, where is the step in or step out location? And sometimes it was off by one. And so I added a feature to highlight the span of the expression that is being broken before or after. And I also realized I used to have this thing called a debugger REPL, where every time you hit a breakpoint, you had a REPL prompt, and you could write expressions involving local variables in scope. And but I realized, well, that's using syntax behind the scene, and Rhombus has some special ideas about top interaction and what's legal or not. So I realized, okay, really we need to eliminate the debug REPL. It wasn't really adding much value. I mean, already the step debugger was showing you the local variable values in situ. Does anyone speak Latin? Is that the correct way to pronounce it? In place. And so the only thing the debugger REPL really let you do was change the value of variables, and well, we can add a command for that. And I'll give you a quick demo of that in a second. The other thing I wanted to do was just take a look at the situation with breakpoints and come up with the idea of a generalized expression for breaking conditionally or unconditionally, or maybe not pausing for the user, but just printing a value, aka a watch point, and trying to gather all those things in one UI. So a very short, very unimpressive mini demo. Let's just run this program. I usually split things on the right, so let me try to do a split like that and get back my window. There we go. That should work. So now let's run this under the step debugger. The break here is before the for list. We can step through. You can see, for example, the x argument or parameter to the f function has a little box next to it showing the current value. So this is the thing where and here we are stepping into a different file as we go through the for list. The g function is defined in this other file, and we return. And the highlighting is maybe a little subtle in this Emacs color scheme, but is a slightly different shade of solarized gray-green than the surrounding one to show you that this is the extent of the expression. So another thing you can do now is, for example, go in and say, well, here I would like to have an expression, which by default could be true. So now when I hit continue, it's going to break there. Hit continue, break there again. X is 2, hit there. X is 4, and now we finally get to the end. So that expression can be unconditional. It could be something like, let's add a new one here. It could be even X. So now we will, and we're actually down here, so it'll break because X is 2. It won't break because X is 4, and otherwise skip it. And it can also be an expression like, I don't know, let's say something like when even X, what would it be? This is a stupid name, but this is the name for now. If I can type correctly, sure. How about that expression? And so now it's over here on the right as it was running. It showed, because that condition was met, we dumped a value, and here we dumped a value, and this value is printed both in REPL output and also to a special logger topic. So that's kind of your, for better or for worse, your version of what a watch point is with a condition, and it could be unconditional. So this is these debugger features are currently still on a feature branch. I haven't merged. I just really wanted to throw it out and see if people had any thoughts. One thought might be, Greg, why are you even spending time on the step debugger? No one uses step debugger. It's 2025. AI will be writing all the code anyway. You don't need to debug it. No, but that's really kind of the topic, and that conversation does not have to take place here. Was that and? Oh yes, this was magic. Emacs incantations to have it open and show images and do things. So I don't really have a spiffy ending for the talk. That's right. Todd was very modest. He wanted me to tell you that Amazon is giving each of us a 5-year free Amazon Prime membership. And he's starting to. I thought Tyler was very good at that. Can you do that? I take. Yeah.
All right, I think we've got time for some questions. So, the quality of Racket mode's layer over the underlying Racket libraries is very high by comparison to other IDE infrastructure. And one thing I've wondered is, would it be possible, valuable to try to take some of that code that you have done a really impressive job of building and make it more reusable, or try to turn it into a library, or try to use some of the code that you've written to do things like make the language server protocol implementation better, or alternatively feed that back into the Dr. Racket toolib code. It feels like there's a lot of really good code inside Racket mode that maybe deserves a more prominent place.
Okay. So, I mean, first of all, from my point of view, I feel like a lot of it is a pretty thin veneer over things that are where the heavy lifting is done by, say, the Czech syntax library and so on, or it's things that are very, very idiosyncratic to Emacs, like, oh, great, it has this new completions annotation UI, and let's grab some of the categories and reflect them whenever we can. So some of that, and so the answer is yes. I wonder if maybe the volume of that code is smaller than you might think, but I'm totally happy and willing to do that, particularly because I am writing on so much, work that other people have done, and I know we can have some conversations this weekend or with other people working on LSP or the Vim code and really dig into that. So that was a long way of saying yes. I don't know if the benefit will be as big as you think, but I'm totally into that. Yeah.
I thought I saw a macro debug major mode.
There is. I don't know if it's as elegant as the graphical macro stepper in Dr. Racket, but there may be times when if you don't feel like leaving Emacs or starting up Dr. Racket, if you don't already have it running, where it might suffice. It does the same kind of full file expansion and stepping through the macro expansion using sorry, I'm having a senior moment. Ryan's, I think, API that you supplied. There's a macro debugger, stepper, text stepper. I forget the name. There's a yeah, but we'll show the steps and you can navigate through that.
I'm not saying hands, so I'm going to get to take MC privilege and go twice. If I'm working in hashlang Racket, do I want to switch to hashlang Racket mode, or am I going to be happier working just in plain old Racket mode?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. There are pros and cons. The classic Racket mode is using basically regular expressions and the moral equivalent to do things like indent and syntax coloring. It does mean you can just open a text file without there being some backend Racket process running. So for casual, quick editing of traditional Racket langs, or maybe in a situation like Sam was describing where the Racket build is a little wonky and you can't run Racket right away, there is something to be said for that. However, if you want, there are always going to be corner cases. It's always Sisyphus rolling a rock up a hill. There will be edge cases where the Racket lexer does the right thing and regular expressions will not. And of course, if you're looking at a lang like Rhombus or Datalog or something that is even remotely like a traditional Racket language, then I think the experience, or Scribble, So personally, I tend to still use classic Racket mode for Racket code because I still have to fix bugs in it. But if it's Scribble or Rhombus or anything else, I'm using the hashlang mode. It is my normal day-to-day thing. Not that I recommend that for everyone, but that's what I do.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks.